check your Google Analytics to see if how Turkey plays into the mix there? Because I suspect that the Turkish government is listening to your show. We know that Rachel Dolezal does not listen because, several weeks ago we exposed how the latest scientific theory, the now debunked scientific theory that we all came out of Africa millions of years ago has now been debunked by the most modern scientific theory that we all came out of Greece. Along the Mediterranean there. We're essentially white Europeans now, is what we are. And so Rachel Dolezal, she went on on the BBC, and she says one of the reasons that she has no problem claiming to be black is because we're all black, because we all originated out of Africa, right?
Right.
So she's not keeping up with the latest science like you and I are, and believe me, folks, we keep up with the latest science. We don't just read Christian websites that talk about science. We go to PLOS ONE and all the different science journals, and we read the journals, the articles themselves, right?
Right.
So the reason I wonder if, so we know that Rachel Dolezal, the black-white girl from Spokane, Washington, former head of the NAACP, who was fired from that job because she is, in fact, not black. We know she doesn't listen to the show. But I'm wondering if the Turkish government listens because today the Turkish government announced that they will no longer teach that human beings came from fish over billions of years. They're not going to teach their children that fairy tale any longer, Carl. Al Pasland-Dermis, the head of curriculum for the Ministry of Education, said that Charles Darwin's theory of evolution was, quote, controversial, unquote, and would be removed from school programs by 2019. He said, we have excluded controversial subjects for students at an age unable yet to understand the issue's scientific background, Mr. Dermis said. So, they're coming on and saying, look, there's two other words in this article. I'm not going to read the article to you, but there's two other words. That they say that the theory of Darwinian evolution is debatable and complicated. Those two words really stuck out to me because there is an entire industry built around the debate over evolution, right? Nobody's debating the Aristotle's view on spontaneous generation anymore. We know that when animals die, the heat generated from the decay does not produce flies.
Right.
Adult flies go in there, they lay eggs, maggots grow up out of there and turn into flies, right? That's what happens there. We know that Aristotle was wrong about that, right? Nobody's debating that anymore. But people make millions of dollars every year writing books debating the belief, the religious belief in evolution and the refutation of that belief.
Well, right? and let me just jump in. You're absolutely right. And so they changed the word from spontaneous generation, because that has been absolutely scientifically debunked, to the word abiogenesis, some fancy sounding name. See, and when he says that it's debatable and complex, the only reason it's complex is because the pseudoscientific welfare science community of evolution makes it complex to hide and to protect their pseudoscience. Abiogenesis is impossible, but it is the foundation of evolution.
One of my favorite episodes of the TV show Frasier. I don't know if you were a fan of Frasier or not.
I was, but the early seasons.
Right. In one of the shows, it was mentioned in the show that the fastest growing language on the planet is Klingon, right? Klingon, from Star Trek, right?
Right.
I don't know that that's true. In fact, I would say that that's not true. I would say the fastest growing language on the planet is Evo Speak.
Yeah.
Evo Speak. They've created it. Right, they've created an entire language centered around a belief in something that does not happen, has not happened, is not observable, and does not exist.
It's not observable, it's not demonstratable, it's not repeatable, it's not falsifiable, and for those that have a third grade education of science, you know that I just repeated scientific method. In order for something to have scientific validity, you have to be able to observe it, you have to be able to demonstrate it, you have to be able to repeat it, and you have to be able to falsify it. And that's I don't have time to explain what falsification means, but it's an absolutely brilliant scientific concept. And then you can discuss it as a scientific theory. Evolution science doesn't match any of that. Yeah,
No.
go ahead.
Well, they tried to shoehorn observations into the theory. For example, Lenski has done he's observed over 100,000 generations of bacterium. It was the E. coli bacterium, right?
Right.
And he's now into it's this experiment that he started years ago, and he's now observed hundreds of thousands of generations, the equivalent of millions of years of human time.
Yep.
And all he's been able to observe, and this was set out as to prove evolution.
Right.
And all he's been able to observe is that bacteria turn into bacteria. That's
right.
all. That's the best he's can come up with.
Right.
Every time they try and prove evolution, they fail because it's not provable. But it's like you and I have said many times over and over again. You take God out of the mix, and this is the best they got.
Right.
This is it.
Right. There's no such thing as deep time evolution. Microevolution, absolutely. Are there changes, small changes within species over the years and adaptation? Yeah, we can observe. That's scientific.
Sure.
It's observable.
Right.
It's demonstratable. It's repeatable. It's falsifiable. That's scientific. But macroevolution, that one species, one kind changes into another kind over millions or billions of years, that's pure conjecture. And it's absolutely unscientific. It's never been observed. It's never been demonstrated. It's never been repeated, and you can't falsify it.
Right. And the other word, before we go to the break, he used the word debatable. The other word was complicated.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to think that when he said complicated, it's kind of like if somebody dies, and the press shows up and says, well, why did this person, like somebody dies on the operating table, right? They're going in for like Joan Gerner, she died on the operating table, right?
Right.
And when the press came in, they said, oh, wait a minute, what happened to Joan? How come she died on the operating table over plastic surgery? And they said, well, she died due to complications. And the Turkish government says because it's debatable and complicated.
Yeah.
Because it died because of complications.
That's good. That's good. Listen, Mike, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have to take a timeout, and as soon as we come back from this, Mike, what we're going to do, let's talk about NASA and their new assignment. Now, I don't know. This article doesn't say that it came from the president because, in the last administration, the guy that was in the White House, I started to say president, the guy that was in the White House, he did give NASA an assignment.
Yes, he did.
And we're going to talk about that. But now we've got another assignment, and I'm not super duper wild about it. I mean, look, we'll talk about it when we come back. I understand where they're going with it, but I think there's some biblical implications, Mike. You and I will talk about it when we come back, okay?
Sure, let's do it.
All right, folks, you're listening. Freedom Friday. Oval Office, Gulf Coast Talk Radio. Carl Gallups in the Oval Office. You are too. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
In a world where nothing is certain, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome
Radio from the heart of America now.
And now, the Commander-in-Chief is back. Freedom Friday with Carl Gallups, the Oval Office of Gulf Coast Talk Radio.
All right, welcome back, America. Welcome back, Gulf Coast. And welcome back, Mike Shoesmith. Glad you're in the Oval Office with me today, Mike. It's good to have you with us.
I'm happy to be here, sir.
I know you are. Listen, let's get into this NASA story because I'm going to introduce it with what Obama's agenda for NASA was. And I'm going to give a direct quote from Charles Bolden, retired United States Marine Corps Major General and former astronaut, and he did an interview with Al Jazeera. Right after Obama came in and gave NASA its assignment. And so I'm going to read that quote, but then I'm going to lay it in your lap to tell the audience what NASA's new assignment is, apparently from Congress, if I'm reading this article correctly, and I guess the president signed off on it. And then you've got a unique view on it. So I want you to tell it. Yeah, I want you to tell our audience. But anyway, let me just go back and remind our audience that when Obama was in office, I'm saying illegally, when he was the illegal commander-in-chief, he gave Charles Bolden, who was the NASA administrator, former astronaut, former United States Marine Corps Major General, et cetera, And Charles Bolden did this interview on Al Jazeera, the largest Islamic news organization in the world. And here's what he said, quote, "When I became the NASA administrator, Obama charged me with 3 things. 1, he wanted me to help re-inspire children to want to get into science and math." Okay, that's cool. I get that. That's a good deal. That's a good thing for NASA to do. Number 2, he wanted me to expand our international relationships. Well, okay, you can do that through the space program. I get that too.
Sure.
That's fine. And 3rd, and then he says, and perhaps foremost, in other words, last but not least, and maybe first, he wanted me to find a way to reach out to the Muslim world and engage much more with dominantly Muslim nations. All right, so far I don't have a huge problem with that, presidentially speaking, internationally speaking. But listen, to reach out to dominant Muslim nations to, quote, help them feel good about their historic contribution to science, math, and engineering. Excuse me, what Muslim nation has ever launched a satellite? What Muslim nation has ever put a man in space? What Muslim nation has ever put somebody in a space shuttle or landed somebody on the moon? What Muslim nation has ever sent out probes into deep space? What Muslim nation has ever come up with the formulas to do such a thing? Good gosh! So that was Obama's objective for NASA, to make the Muslim nations feel good about themselves. I could talk about that for an hour, Mike, but I want you to talk about what the new assignment is and your take on it. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, the prior administration passed down the gauntlet of, okay, let's have international relations. Now, the new administration, they want NASA to focus on intergalactic relations, apparently, because there are new goals given to NASA. The first being find aliens, the second being prove evolution. So now NASA's getting into conspiracy theory stuff.
That's what I'm saying.
The biggest controversy facing humanity. Christopher Hitchens once said, every single argument facing humanity is simply a sub-argument underneath the primary argument, that is, belief in God and the repudiation of that belief, right?
Right.
One of the very few things I can actually agree with Hitch on. But when you have people like Chris Hadfield going up into space, spending years at the space station, being commander of the space station, and doing this and that up in space, coming back to Earth, retiring from NASA, writing a book, doing the book tour, doing the interview circuits and so on, and saying, when I was up in space, in the space shuttle, I looked out the left window, and I saw a universe that has a myriad of ways of killing us, and all it wants to do is kill us. And there's nothing but death and emptiness out the left side of the window. I look out the right side of the window, I see this big blue ball teeming with life, trillions of different forms of life forms, and I think to myself, how is that possible apart from God in a universe that only wants to kill you? So when I look at these two new assignments, find aliens and prove evolution, what I'm hearing from Donald Trump, if he has anything to say in this, is, okay, here's $1 billion, now prove it, and if you can't prove it,
Shut
there's
up.
no more money. The tap is being turned off for you. Shut up.
That's good. I pray that you are correct. Oh, I pray that you are correct. But, that would be brilliant. And
I think so.
Yeah, and also the Find Life thing. Good gosh, we're running out of time. My brain is just jumbled. For decades and decades and decades, as deep as we've gone into space, we haven't even found a bacterium anywhere.
Right.
I know.
And if they do, they will spend billions and trillions of dollars trying to protect it and the ecology around it.
Yeah, and then they'll spend another billions and trillions trying to prove that they didn't put it there by contamination. Mike, I hear the music. We got to go, man. Time always flies when you're on. Thank you, and God bless you, Mike Shoesmith. You're executive editor of PNN. Tell folks how to get you.
ppsimmons@live.com. I look forward to the rest of the show. I love you guys, and we'll talk to you next week, I hope.
All right, good deal.